In 1827, frescoes were discovered in the Tomba dei Rilievi, as remarkable as any found in Greece. Painted on damp plaster, they reveal the Etruscan cult of the dead, similar to that of Egypt in the same era. Vases, pottery, and art objects were part of the furnishings the dead would need in the afterlife. But what of their gods? The Etruscans believed in the homely gods, the gods of the threshold and hearth. They also believed in the mighty gods, based on the Greek Zeus and Hera. What the Etruscans took from the Greeks, the Romans took from the Etruscans. From the father god and mother goddess to the humble household gods. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera, the wife of Zeus, became Juno. Aphrodite became Venus. Poseidon, the sea god, became Neptune. The pantheon, the home of all the gods, became the religious heart of imperial Rome. Designed by Hadrian, it was the sanctuary of the Roman gods, dedicated to the Emperor Augustus, who encouraged the idea of his own divinity. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, spread to the very edges of the empire. The Roman legions brought their gods with them to the far-flung regions of the empire. A Roman emperor might make a sacrifice to Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, to enlighten his rule. Far from the security of Rome, the legionaries of Caerleon would beg the favor of Mars, the god of war. Caerleon was replicated all along the edges of the empire, in forts and towns that held to Roman gods and Roman ways and protected Rome from the barbarians. All-powerful Rome was an empire in which the border between state and religion was becoming increasingly blurred. Why would it fear foreign gods? Emperor Hadrian's villa in Tivoli covered an area greater than that of the imperial center of Rome. Here, Hadrian created one of the greatest exhibitions of art and architecture, and most of it copied from the Greeks. The Romans regarded foreign gods as having power over the people who worshipped them. By bringing them to Rome and housing them in splendor, Hadrian hoped to transfer their power and their favor to the empire. His most ambitious project was the Canopus, a replica of the sanctuary of the Egyptian god Serapis in Alexandria. For this he had a canal dug 119 meters long and lined with imported Egyptian statues, caryatids similar to those on the Acropolis. The statues of the Greek gods in Tivoli show how far the Roman gods had evolved from vague elemental noumena to take on human features and form. The Greeks gave faces to the Roman gods. On an island in a round pool, surrounded by columns, the man who ruled the lives of some 15 million subjects found solitude. In Tivoli, Hadrian built a walled sanctuary for foreign gods and to house the art and architecture of conquered nations. But the threat to the Roman gods would come from the east, from a city gifted to Rome by the Greeks. According to the historian Aristides, Ephesus was Asia's greatest center of trade and banking. It was an exotic city of marble streets and magnificent temples, the envy of the ancient world. Founded in the 13th century BC by the Greek Androclus, it was bequeathed to the Romans in 133 BC. The Romans were content to allow the Ephesians pay homage to the Greek god Artemis, the Egyptian god Isis, or any of the other gods who had found followers in this cosmopolitan city, so long as they paid their taxes to Rome. Ephesus was dedicated to Artemis, the man-hating goddess of the moon, the woodlands, and women in childbirth. Her temple was one of the 7 wonders of the world. A simple column remains. Marooned on a marsh, it's a fitting monument to the Greek architect Theodorus. Challenged to build on a marsh, he filled the foundations with coal, topped with leather. On this novel base, he raised a temple 115 meters long and 55 meters wide, the biggest marble temple in the world. The vision of Theodorus was awe-inspiring. 127 columns supported a massive wooden roof built with cedar beams. It was the pride of Ephesus. The most beautiful Roman contribution to Ephesus was dedicated to the Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century AD. It was famous for the craftsmanship of its facade. 2 columns with Corinthian capitals support a capstone decorated with a carving of Tyche, the goddess of fortune. The upper lintel holds a relief of Medusa, one of the 3 gorgons of Greek mythology, whose appearance could turn men to stone. But it is the frieze around the upper lintel of the door that illustrates vividly the Roman influence on Greek Ephesus. Greek gods and Roman emperors share the frieze with mythological gods and heroes as equals. What threat could there be to the divine Roman emperor, the equal to Zeus and Apollo, in the conquered city of Ephesus? In the 4th century AD, a cult worshipped a man called Jesus, whose blood they claimed would renew the world and save his believers. But a state that required worship of the emperor and would house, honor, and accommodate a multitude of gods could never accept a religion that worshipped one God and no other. But even the legions of Rome and the walls of Hadrian could not hold forever against the tide of history and the spiritual quest of human hearts. The Roman Emperor Constantine, convinced that the new god Jesus had aided him in battle, converted to Christianity. Under Constantine, Christianity became the state religion. And what of the Roman gods? In some ways, they had become servants of the state and risen to prominence on the back of its military might. Rome would become a city of temples dedicated to the new god, and a graveyard for the lost gods.